Who is on Jack Smith's team? Who is really prosecuting Trump, and how far is this government effort going? Where does it extend? Trump files a new motion to define Jack Smith's team and to really understand what he can do in terms of requesting information and from whom. What government agencies are a part of this? Because the government is attempting to keep this very small and narrow. They don't want Donald Trump going in and getting records from, the CIA. They don't want to say that people who were openly negative to Trump and prosecuting him, pseudo prosecution, in the months before Jack Smith got appointed, they don't want to consider those people to be a part of the team. Jack Smith is supposed to be a special counsel. This is supposed to be a fair and independent investigation. If he brings in a bunch of people who were massively anti-Trump before his office was even constituted, is this really a fair and independent investigation? Answer, no. But Trump is submitting two different motions. We're going to go through two documents today, both a part of the same motion. The first is permission for leave to file, the more substantive motion, which is a request to define the scope of Jack Smith's team. And here is what it looks like from Trump's defense. The 4-page request is motion for leave for permission to file an unredacted motion and other exhibits under seal. Saying, Your Honor, Judge Chutkan, D.C. Court, says President Trump, through his lawyer, now moves pursuant to your other protective order, saying we can't just file whatever we want. We want to file an unredacted copy of this enclosed motion, right? We're going to see some serious redactions on this filing, which is the original filing, the redacted version that hit the docket. They say, we want to file this under seal because there are some sensitive materials that you said that we can't talk about. Now, Trump objects to any of the proceedings in this case being conducted under seal. The materials are submitted should be available to the public, they say. We're sorry we have to redact this, but the protective order requires it as designated from the special counsel. They say that this being kept from the public's eye is wrong. They want us to see all of the rest of the materials. But Jack Smith doesn't want us to, and Judge Chutkan doesn't want us to. So Trump also seeks the permission to file on the public docket a redacted version of the motion also included that does not disclose sensitive materials to the public. They say that we're asking Chutkan to enter an order making plain, very clearly, the scope of Jack Smith's team and ordering Jack Smith to identify and produce discovery to which Trump is entitled. Our motion is citing different portions of this case, including that Jack Smith has some materials have been designated sensitive. And because some of this has been designated sensitive, we're filing this. And then we know the court has power to do this. And so give us permission to file unredacted versions of this motion in the future. So here is the actual substantive portion of this. This is Trump's motion for an order regarding the scope of the prosecution team. Now it is redacted. And so we're going to hit the introduction of this motion, but we got to take a quick pause and say thank you to our friends. Hate feeling miserable the day after drinks? I did too. Luckily, a game-changing product called ZBiotics is here to help. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut where you need it most. Just remember to drink ZBiotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. That's it. I wish I had this during law school. Here's how it works. They come in little bottles, very convenient. You give one a good shake, twist the top off, drink the whole thing, and you're done. Easy. I got the 6-pack, which looks like this. It comes with an instructional booklet, has a very simple twist top right here, and every bottle has a reminder to drink responsibly. So this holiday season, give your family and friends the gift of a better tomorrow with ZBiotics. Go to zbiotics.com/RobertG or scan the QR code on the screen right now to get 15% off your first order when you use code RobertG at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using my code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or the occasion. ZBiotics is backed by a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/RobertG and use the code RobertG at checkout for 15% off. And thank you to ZBiotics for sponsoring this segment. And now, let's hit the introduction. Back on the motion from Trump's defense to define the scope of Jack Smith's team. Saying, Your Honor, Judge Chutkan, President Trump respectfully submits this motion and the accompanying accompanying classified supplement for an order requiring Jack Smith's office to comply with its discovery obligations with respect to all evidence that is a part of this case. They say Jack Smith and his office, they hope to rush this case to trial. We know why. It's part of a politically motivated strategy to undermine the Biden administration's main leading component in the 2024 election. And in doing so, Jack Smith has ignored its fundamental discovery obligations and the court's August order to produce all the exculpatory evidence to the defendant under the rules, including documents that are essential to Trump's case and his opportunity to defend against the lies in the indictment. Now, while it is true, says Trump's defense, that the prosecution has produced a significant volume of material, I think like 13 million pages or something, it has intentionally and unlawfully declined to search for other exculpatory documents that are in its actual or constructive possession, including materials held by personnel or entities that have participated in or assisted with the investigations related to the 2020 election and January 6th. Now remember, in any criminal case, as I mentioned, the government has all of the evidence and all of the cards. But in most criminal cases, kind of a small scope. You're just dealing with the police department that did the investigation. Maybe you go to the crime lab, maybe they send it from a local police department to a state crime lab and you got two entities you're dealing with. Maybe you got an MVD in there if it's a DUI. Maybe you got a licensing board in there. So you got a couple different entities. But this is like the federal government, okay? Trump was the president. So basically everything is fair game, right? Anything that is related to the executive branch, anything that is related to the investigation, it's like all of it. And so Trump wants to know, well, is there any exculpatory material anywhere? Like, I know the DOJ, you're going to say you gave us what you have, but we don't trust you to go look around in all the nooks and crannies of the federal bureaucracy. And you need to do that in order for us to do our job. Now, examples of this unethical strategy are myriad, many. For instance, President Trump has identified instances of prosecutors taking positions that are wholly inconsistent with Jack Smith's office. In response, Jack Smith has incredibly claimed that its discovery obligations don't reach the DOJ. We don't have to give you anything from our Department of Justice. Are you crazy? They say that these components worked on the cases. Now, despite relying on information and evidence from agencies like DHS, the Defense Department, the CIA, the Postal Inspection Service, the Office of the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, all these people were involved in it. But the prosecution refuses to acknowledge any obligation to review or produce material from those entities. Jack Smith has already collaborated with those entities in its case, but we don't have to give you materials from them. You say, yes, you do. Likewise, notwithstanding close coordination with the January 6th committee, dating back to at least 2021, the office's production of unclassified material from the committee, the office, Jack Smith, has failed to search for or produce exculpatory materials from Liz Cheney's classified materials. Now, courts in this district and elsewhere have repeatedly rejected the types of limitations and the restrictions that Jack Smith's office has sought to put on its discovery obligations. And through this motion, we seek relief from this unconstitutionality. You're depriving Trump of his right to prepare for his defense and risk compromising the fairness of the trial. Now, we know the local rules and the applicable law. Local rules say you got to give us this material, and now they're asking about the scope of the team. They say for purposes of discovery, the prosecution's possession or control extends not just to their own file, but also any evidence known to any others acting on the government's behalf on this case, including the police. All right, so Jack Smith is going to say, look, I only have one manila file folder. I mean, it's not true. He's got 13 million pages, but in theory, this is it. This is only the 13 million pages that you need. We need a lot more than that. I got no obligation to go outside here and fill my file. I don't need it. Now, they say the scope of the prosecution's team is generally resolved on a case-by-case basis. And so here, the government has an affirmative duty to search. So Jack Smith, right, if he says, I'm only limited by the FBI, for example, okay, but you have an obligation to step outside of the FBI and go search other areas. You have an affirmative duty to go find this stuff. Why? Because the defense can't find it, right? The defense can't go knock on the door for the CIA and say, hi, do you have any exculpatory material in there for Trump? Obviously not. They say government prosecutors have to seek all exculpatory material from their files. Justice Department manual says it as well. We see. They give us more background. They say Trump served a classified discovery letter on Jack Smith's office. We've sent multiple letters to them, but they sent a one-page response on October 15th. They said they said it's legally a baseless position, saying that, quote, the prosecution team, Jack Smith's quote, is limited to the special counsel's office, the law enforcement officers who are working on this case, and Jack Smith's team does not include agencies or components whose personnel are not working on the case. They sent another letter. They said, oh no, we are working consistently with provisions of the Justice Department manual, but they didn't explain what that means. And that Jack Smith prosecutors, they also said that we understand our discovery obligations and we will comply with them. But the letter did not confirm that they've responded to the materials that we produced. So we got on a phone call with them. And during a call on November 21st, we conferred with Jack Smith's office. He said, hey, losers, it's us again. We're asking for more material. Do you have it yet? They said, hey, jerks, no, we don't. On November 25th, the office provided a written response to our November 15th letter. The office disclosed that, quote, law enforcement agencies that worked on the investigation leading to this case were the FBI, so we checked them off, the DOJ Inspector General, checked them off, the National Archives Inspector General, NARA, Deborah Steidel-Wall is retiring, by the way, and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, all those agencies. Now they say, okay, well, that's great. We knew there were a lot of them. So underscoring the need for this motion, the office, Jack Smith, then took the position for the first time with respect to numerous discovery requests that responsive materials were not within the possession of the prosecution team. So we don't have them. They're not in our manila file folder, so we can't give them to you. We have 13 million pages of irrelevant garbage, though, that will drop off in the back of a dumpster for you that you have to read. We don't want any of that. We want this. Well, we don't have it. Well, why don't you have it? Well, because if we had it, we'd have to give it to you. We know that, which is why we're asking for motions. They say, Your Honor, in this case, discovery obligations of Jack Smith, it extends to the entire office, right? It extends to the DOJ. Everybody who participated in the investigations related to 2020 and J6. Also, all federal agency components that participated or assisted those and the records of the January 6th committee. They're all part of the team. They say this is not what Jack Smith says. The team is not limited to attorneys who are, quote, working on this case. They say, just to put a pin in this for a second, it's also important to recognize, and they might get to it here, but Jack Smith's office was created recently, and he picked up a bunch of people who were already working on this. So the special counsel who's supposed to be appointed after Trump announces he's running and, oh, okay, now we have to separate this out, he just picks up everybody who was already working on it in the first place, meaning that the investigation was not separate, fair, and independent, and impartial, and all the things they claim it was. The special counsel's office, pursuant to the Attorney General Garland's order, had conducted broad investigations that gave rise to this case and other charges in Florida. They say lawless charges. Now, in accordance with that order, the special counsel's office did not silo its investigative activities or its personnel during the investigation, and it should not be permitted to do so now for purposes of discovery. For example, they say Jack Smith's office used the same grand jury in this district in DC for matters in both cases. So they used a DC grand jury to go get information that they used to file in Florida. They say Assistant Special Counsel John Pelletieri has appeared on behalf of Jack Smith's office in this case and in Florida. Senior Assistant Special Counsel Saska Thomas Wyndham, who has entered a notice of appearance in this case in DC, he also participated in at least 27 interviews in Florida. Julie Edelstein in the Florida case also participated in 29 interviews in this case. Jay Bratt, counsel of record in Florida, also participated in 10 interviews in this case. Now, notwithstanding the clear overlap of personnel and their intermixed responsibilities, the office has sought to artificially narrow its definition of the prosecution team to an unidentified subset of individuals who, quote, apparently in its sole judgment are, quote, working on this case, whatever that means. Not so. As the entire office has participated in this prosecution, both in fact and by General Garland's order, the entire DOJ is subject to the prosecution's discovery obligations. So we don't care if it's not in your manila file folder. Get it. Now, the U.S. Attorney's Office for DC, right? These people were just all over the place, just like, you know. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the DC says the prosecution's team also includes the DC office. They participated in any investigation related to 2020, as well as personnel now or who previously assisted the special counsel. It's broad. Prior to and in anticipation of the appointment of the special counsel, the DC prosecutors played a leading role in the investigation in this case. For example, in November 2020, Deputy Special Counsel called J.P. Cooney and Molly Gaston, we know her as Highlighter Girl, who convinced Judge Chutkan that Trump's defense didn't even need to read the discovery because she organized everything and had a nice little flowchart or something. I don't even know. But she said, we organized everything with sticky notes and tabs. And Chutkan's like, I love this. I love highlighters. Yes, they don't need to read 13 million pages of documents. Trial scheduled for March. So they were there as prosecutors, okay? This is before January 6th even happened. Molly was working as a prosecutor in DC. She wrote to Attorney General General Bill Barr, and she said back then in November that the election claims of fraud were false. They didn't even have any time to investigate. We didn't even have outcomes from courts. But Molly, who is now prosecuting this case, was already decided, despite not having any time to investigate anything. Now, consistent with the political bias reflected in their correspondence, in early 2021, Cooney, another prosecutor, led a group of prosecutors in D.C. who wanted to expand their investigations to target Trump. So both of these people are partisan hacks who have already been anti-Trump from day one, and Jack Smith just put them on the team. So the D.C. then prosecuted the first charges related to January 6th, which were announced on January 8th, and that the public and court-facing role has continued today. On January 12th, acting U.S. Attorney in D.C., Michael Sherwin led one of the first press conferences back on January 12th, just 6 days after J6. Immediately following Garland's confirmation in March, Sherwin briefed Garland on the status of the investigation. When Sherwin left his post to go back to Florida, he violated DOJ policy and participated in a 60 minutes interview regarding the investigation. The following day, DC's chief of criminal division notified Judge Mehta that Sherwin was the target of an investigation by the DOJ Office of Professional Responsibility. So then Sherwin left. In November 2021, Matthew Graves was sworn in, and Graves immediately started pushing the DOJ to bring seditious conspiracy charges. Around that time, 2021, Thomas Wyndham, he arrived in D.C. as a transfer from the Maryland Attorney's Office. That same month, FBI Washington then rejected grand jury subpoenas that were proposed by Wyndham because his plan sounded eerily similar to Cooney's proposal that had already been shot down, as well as a pitch by Wyndham to pursue the fake electors. So these people, bloodthirsty, bloodlusty prosecutors. Let's go after Trump. I'm going to make my career on this. Rather than recognizing the lack of any evidentiary basis for these grand jury proceedings, because who cares about that, Wyndham discreetly asked the Postal Inspection Service if it might help. Can you guys manufacture something? With the biased project that the FBI had already declined to pursue. Now, didn't stop there. During the summer of 2022, Graves put Cooney in charge of the investigation in D.C. In November 2022, Cooney, Wyndham, and roughly 20 others agreed to join the Special Counsel's office. The order appointing the Special Counsel notes the ongoing responsibility of the D.C. team for, quote, currently pending and future investigations. Now, these responsibilities do not alter the fact that this case originated as a D.C. investigation. They all just moved over, okay? So 20 people just picked up their bags. They were already in psycho mode trying to go after Trump, and they just went over to Jack Smith's office. So since the order, the Special Counsel's office has enjoyed constructive access to the D.C. documents. So Jack Smith didn't do his investigation on his own. He just pillaged everything from D.C. In August, the discovery letter, Jack Smith wrote that the D.C., quote, maintains a separate database of materials compromising discovery in the J6 cases. The letter also stated that the, quote, investigative team in the case had accessed certain materials within that database and has taken into its possession certain materials that the investigative team may rely on or use at trial. So they say, great. So Trump's people say, great. So the Special Counsel, you were accessing the D.C. database? Great. We want to access the D.C. database too. That means there is no question that the D.C. team is part of Jack Smith's team. You just get unfettered access unless you're part of the team. Now, Jack Smith also includes the components within the DOJ that participated in the investigations and deliberations related to the charging decisions. Who said go? The Office of the Attorney General, Office of the Deputy Attorney General, and the National Security Division, and the Public Integrity Section, and others. Now, current and former, quote, senior leaders of the DOJ are likely witnesses in this case. We know that from the indictment. The indictment also contains allegations about so-called sham election crime investigations. Sham election crime investigations. So Trump was investigating crimes, but they were not real. But these officials and members of the DOJ Public Integrity Section played key roles in suppressing those very investigations that were related to widespread fraud. As one example, on November 8th, 2020, what is that? Says the DOJ suppressed investigations relating to widespread fraud in 2020. Here's one example. Redacted, 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 redacted. That comes from that document. Also, redacted, 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 and redacted. Now, the following day, Bill Barr removed the consultation requirement that the director had relied on in an effort to suppress the investigation. After Bill Barr resigned on November 12th, Cooney and Molly sent the above described letter to Bill Barr, declaring without basis, contrary to the facts that were emerging, that claims of fraud were false. Okay, so somebody did something. Following day, Bill Barr removes a consultation requirement that they had used to suppress the investigation. Bill Barr gets skittish. He leaves, resigns. Molly sends a letter. We're coming after you. And Bill Barr, as we know, is an institutionalist. So he's like, well, if the DOJ says I shouldn't do this, and I shouldn't. So he resigns. Now, subsequently, after Bill Barr got the letter from Cooney and Molly, redacted happened. And then redacted happened. And then, oh my gosh, redacted happened. I can't even explain what's happening here because it's just too hard to explain. More redactions. And I would love to be able to share what's in this sentence, but I can't because I can't read it. Now, they say beginning in January 2021, personnel from the DOJ's National Security Division joined the DC office in prosecuting cases related to January 6. So more players enter the game. And so-and-so and so-and-so did that thing, and that thing led to this thing. And we note the following. We can't read it. And you can see why, obviously, Jack Smith and Chutkan want this gag order to be in place because this looks pretty problematic. The NSD joined the division. What did they do? Now, in February 2021, the National Archives, their Inspector General, they asked the Justice Department Election Crimes Branch, which is part of the Public Integrity Section, to consider investigating the seemingly coordinated effort in swing states. So National Archives, Inspector General, now pings this over to DOJ in February. They said, citing prosecutors' discretion, the department told the archives it would not pursue the topic, according to two people familiar with the decision. Also in February, the acting AG explained that he received daily updates on the capital cases daily. DOJ leadership participated in discussions about Cooney's proposal to trace who had financed the false claims of the election. Sherwin briefed Matt Axelrod, who had been selected by President Biden to, quote, run the DOJ until Garland and Monaco could be confirmed, on Cooney's inappropriate proposal. High-level DOJ participation in the investigation continued after Attorney General Garland took over. Just hours after he was sworn in, Garland and his deputies were briefed on the J6 investigation. During the summer of 21, Garland and Lisa Monaco, they continued to get briefing materials related to this as well. The Office of the AG and the Deputy AG Monaco participated in deliberations over whether to bring seditious conspiracy charges against Rhodes. Garland getting, quote, deep into the weeds on this. Sherwin later, U.S. Attorney, told the Washington Post that he heard from a close Justice Department ally that Garland and his deputies felt boxed into the seditious conspiracy charges or to tough questions if they didn't bring them. Interesting, isn't it? Now, by at least 2021, Matthew Olson, the Assistant AG for National Security, he pressed to take on a role in the J6 case. Olson argued to Monaco and other senior Justice Department officials that an effort to block the peaceful transfer of power was squarely in the vein of the National Security Division, and he wanted to join the team. As further evidence of close coordination between the DOJ and the DC office, they were working together. Now, they're also saying the FBI in Washington, the Washington field office, is also part of the team, and we need to know about them. They say because their personnel are potential witnesses, and they've assisted the relevant investigations since their inception. FBI was involved. On January 2nd, this agent did that horrific thing, and this piece of garbage did that thing. By at least January 3rd, these losers all did this thing. Can't read what it is. Now, in late 2021, Mike D'Antuono, the assistant director in charge of the FBI Washington, he gave Wyndham full access, he's a U.S. prosecutor, to the FBI's, quote, trove of evidence about the Oath Keeper and Proud Boy extremists involved in the riots. In April 2022, the FBI opened a formal investigation in targeting President Trump, and apparently without acknowledging in internal files that the agents were targeting Trump. Director Wray signed off on the authorization opening up a criminal investigation, and some of the ex-president's advisors and his re-election campaign were identified as the focus of the Bureau's probe, but not President Trump. So the FBI's in on it too. Now, for similar reasons, DHS is also a part of the team. Trump says the Secret Service needs to be involved, and CISA. Now, not surprisingly, at least two courts in this district have already concluded that the Secret Service is part of J6 cases. We know that. And also, as described in other parts of Homeland's strategic plans, they participated in the election by creating an election task force. DHS was. In fact, CISA coordinated these efforts with DHS's Office of Intelligence and Analysis, which is part of the IC and the FBI. This sentence is also redacted. Now, in addition, in the indictment, Jack Smith also credited and relied upon Chris Krebs, former CISA director, as well as joint statements from their agency. And DHS also participated in security efforts related to the protests at the Capitol. We know that because this sentence has been redacted. Now, on January, the acting attorney general General announced that the DOJ had been working closely with other agencies like the DHS, and so we know the DHS should be involved. They talk about the DOD, say that components of the DOD were also part of Jack Smith's team. This is the entire deep state being listed here. On January 6, Capitol Police and Metro Police pleaded with DOD officials for immediate assistance. According to Mark Milley, Trump had previously directed Acting Secretary of Defense to ensure that there was sufficient National Guard and soldiers there. Milley says it himself, that the acting secretary responded, saying, "We've got a plan and we've got it covered." But on the afternoon of January 6, the acting secretary approved a request for more assistance, saying that miscommunication and confusion during the preparations demonstrated by conflicting reports about who authorized the deployment contributed to the delay. They also want the Office of the DNI, Director of National Intelligence. They say in early January, the Director of National Intelligence, they facilitated a classified briefing with co-conspirator number 4. In the indictment, the prosecution ignored that stuff, but the ODNI assisted in the investigation that led to this case. We discussed this in the classified supplement. We know the CIA is also a part of Jack Smith's team, telling us, well, that they're not going to tell us anything about that one. That is the shortest section in here. For the reasons stated in the classified supplement, the CIA's assistance merits inclusion on the prosecution team. Don't you want to read that one? Really want to read that one. What did the CIA do? They say the J6 committee is also closely aligned. During the fall and winter, Timothy Heapy, the lead investigator, was working with the DC team. For example, in November 2021, prosecutors from that office charged Steve Bannon with criminal contempt. In April of 2022, in an apparent effort to conceal the extent of the coordination between the DOJ and the J6 committee, leadership from the DOJ's criminal division and the U.S. Attorney's Office in DC sent a letter to Heapy with a broad request for interview transcripts. Based on self-serving leaks from the DOJ that there were subsequently contradicted by the New York Times, they say generally investigators were working on information but had not been information sharing. They have not been sharing information. So they're like, yes, we have. And they said, we better fix that. So he sends a letter. Can you send us like one of everything? He's like, oh, certainly. Thank you for the official request. Here is one of everything, to cover up the fact that they were already sharing everything. Now, at some point, the committee started to engage in negotiation. A deal was obviously struck between the two, but none of that's been disclosed. So we need to see that now. They give us some discussion. They say, this is important. Materials that are in the prosecution's team are a part of the team, within their team, need to be disclosed to us. The team is not limited to the attorneys who entered their appearances on this case. The office says that they comply with the Justice Manual, but it seems like they're not doing that now. President Trump cannot predict all the different types of discoverable material in those files, but we know that some material exists. For example, Jack Smith's office should not be permitted to present testimony from, quote, senior leaders of the Justice Department without reviewing their electronic communications for materials. Yeah, if their witnesses are senior leaders of the DOJ, well, we need to know what they were saying in their emails so that we can cross-examine them and get to the bottom of who they are as witnesses. The office has accessed hard copy files, in storage at the office of the AG, and because of this material and because it exists, we are entitled to see it. There are also inconsistent statements from Jack Smith's prosecutors in this case and in other cases, and we need to get to the bottom of those discrepancies. And finally, because Jack Smith's incorrect theory of Trump's responsibility for the J6 events is materially different from positions in other cases, they say that they can't rely on case file reviews. We need to go deeper, and that Jack Smith has an obligation to give us these materials, saying the prosecutor has an affirmative duty to give us these things, and that our discovery extends to the January 6 records as well. In November 2021, General Milley told the committee, we have a boatload of documentary stuff, both classified and unclassified. I'll make sure that we get you whatever we have. It's a lot. So General Milley is likely a prosecution witness. He turned over documents to the committee, including classified materials. And so if Milley gave them to Cheney, we want those materials as well. And for the foregoing reasons, they say President Trump respectfully submits that the court should enter an order defining the scope of the prosecution team so that we know what we can go get. If it's just the DOJ and Jack Smith's office, well, we can't really go outside and get anything. In the alternative, they say the court should hold a classified hearing to address this case. Signed by John Lauro and Todd Blanche, filed in Judge Chutkan's courtroom in the January 6 case out of Washington, D.C. So it would be nice to know who the other players are so that you can go and ask for evidence that they might have. But we know what Judge Chutkan is likely to do, which I think will be to deny this or her to say that it's not her position, right? It's up to Jack Smith's team to define Jack Smith's team. And if they want to argue over bits and pieces of evidence, she'll deal with that in another motion to compel. We'll see what she does. But of course, Jack Smith will be responding to this, and then Trump will issue a reply, and we'll be here continuing to cover. Now, there is a lot of conversation about this case and other cases. MSNBC's #1 show, Inside Jen Psaki, brought on this guy to talk about the threats of Trump in a second term. And this is what it sounded like.
As I just outlined there, I mean, there is a lot to talk about in terms of the threat of a second term. Obviously, there's the threat to democracy, abortion rights, Obamacare. What have you found is the most effective with voters, and what should people expect to be seeing more from the campaign?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me tonight, Jen. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I mean, all of it, really. I mean, a second Donald Trump term would be disastrous for Americans, particularly Americans of color, all over, across the board. You know, we're going to focus on making sure that we call out these things that he's saying that he would kill. For instance, Obamacare today is just the latest thing on the chopping block. And it's not really a surprise. There are not many pieces of legislation that actually literally save lives. And the ACA and Obamacare is one of them. And it's no surprise that, you know, Donald Trump, the so-called architect of the birther movement, is going after the marquee piece of legislation from the first African-American president. I mean, who does that? This is something that would literally rip away health care from 40 million Americans, drive up the uninsured rate.
Do you think that's about Obama more than health care?
I think it's a petty grievance from somebody who is unfit and woefully unqualified to be president of the United States. And it's in stark contrast to what Joe Biden is doing to lower health care costs, cap the cost of prescription drugs, life-saving drugs, and make health care more affordable. And so all this is somebody that's doubling down and being completely petty and not focused on the real issues that are impacting Americans.
And that's how they feel, right? So it's everywhere. It's abortion. It's all the issues. And so Trump needs to be taken out. Otherwise, it's a serious threat. And we'll be here continuing to cover this case and more, my friends. We'll see what else Jack Smith says in response to this in Chutkan's courtroom. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for inviting someone that you know to come out and check our live streams here. We go live daily during the week at 5 p.m. Eastern time. We'd love to have you here. We'd love to have them here. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.